Good morning, good morning, good morning, good people, fellow humans, fellow colorful nuts, because that's what we is. We is colorful nuts. And here we are on Saturday, September 27th. I remember a month ago thinking that, wow, in just under 2 weeks is my birthday. But here we are. It's like a porcupine connection going again. Okay, but so here we are, 27th of September, Saturday, which means what? It means G.school. Right, you are. Uh, let's see. So, yes, this is also day 6 of week 3 of our neuroscience-oriented approach to success. We're winding up this week outside our school-sized kingdom. How do we get people to help us become successful? Where our definition of success is what? Our definition of success is money times success is a function of money times meaning and purpose. Right, success is a function of money times meaning and purpose. Where meaning is defined as acting such that everything you do matters. That's how we have meaning. And purpose is service to others. So service to others, we want to give service to others. Yeah, we want to give service to others. We want to do things that matter, service to others, and the more money you can throw at it, the more you're going to be able to do. Because as a mathematical equation, money is a function of, success is a function of money. So if your meaning and purpose is 0, you can have unlimited money times 0 is still 0. On the other hand, you could have almost no money, 1. You can have, well, let's say it's 2, and your meaning and purpose is 1,000. 2 times 1,000 is 2,000. Hey, good job, good job. But if you have 1,000,000 times 1,000, that's 1,000,000,000. So it adds up. Money, maybe it's money times meaning and purpose squared. Maybe that's the better way to say it. Yeah. Because maybe that's the real thing. It's not just what I would call linear. It's that way. Okay, cool. All right, so now weekends is what we call G.school. Our focus is the spiritual side of life. And I will tell you, in fact, the theme of today, what's the theme of today? The pre-church church. So I would tell you, it's kind of strange, kind of interesting to have a church where the people running the church don't know the pre-church church. They don't know the apostolic fathers. Now, Catholic theologians, well, not theologians, Catholic apologists would say they don't want to know the pre-church church. They don't want to know the pre-Nicene church. They really aren't interested in the pre-Lutheran, pre-Calvin church. They're not interested in that. Because if you wind it all the way back to the pre-church church, or the earliest church, let's just say the earliest church, the apostolic fathers, the problem for Protestants is you're going to find they are all Catholic. Yeah, They're Catholic. They believe in a hierarchy structure. They believe that Mary is important. They don't worship Mary, but Mary is very important. She is the Mother of God, and they believe in the Eucharist. That's the earliest church. That's what they believed. So Protestants today, which are, almost 500 years after Luther, have a church built upon that with which they do not know. You say, well, what was Luther's church built on? A corrupt system. Okay, well, it was a system that became corrupt, but what about before that? Before that, all the way back. What about that? You see that the Catholic churches, the Orthodox Church, they still do things how they did them back in the day. Now, do the people need to know? The clergy, the church, meaning the people, do they need to know the pre-church church? Let's ponder that as we look at our worksheet. We find out advice from an 80-year-old. Keep it simple. Right. That absolutely fits in with the idea of the pre-church church versus you get people coming up with all kinds of stories to harmonize the different things in the New Testament into the Old Testament, etc. Here's what God wants. Wow. That's pretty presumptuous of you to speak for God. Okay, so advice from an 80-year-old. Keep it simple. Occam's razor, the law of parsimony. TED Talk, Jerry Maguire, Who's Coming With Me? Here's an example of a non-compelling story. Here's what happens when you tell a story that's not compelling. And you can look at it on several layers from the body language. Like if you watch it without the sound on, you'll see desperation. He doesn't pull people towards him. Okay. Seth Godin, buffet problem. How we doing for time? Such a runic rhyme. Okay, the buffet problem. The next dish. It might be better than the one you have now. The presence of the next dish, its possibility corrodes our experience. Compared to what keeps needling us? The next dish, the possibility, compared to what? The next email, the next text, the next blog post. It arrives unbidden, unasked for. Here it comes, next. Like Lucy in the Chocolate Factory, we're trained to simply focus on next, which is really rarely as satisfying as a now. Okay, so what is a buffet? It's where you get to choose among all of these different things, but you can't have all of them only because you physically can't have all of them. Not because there's any rule. The rule is you can have whatever you want. You can eat as much as you want, but you can't take it with you. You can't bring, Tupperware containers, Cool Whip containers, fill them up to take home. No, you have to eat it there. The presence of the next dish, its possibility corrodes our experience. Compared to what? Keeps needling us. Okay, so there we go. What else we got here? Advice from an 80-year-old, keep it simple. Jerry Maguire got how not to tell a compelling story, so we can use it as an example. Here's how you tell a compelling story by looking at the one that's a not compelling story. Seth Godin, the buffet problem. All right. How's our time? Such a runic rhyme. We got a couple minutes that we can talk about the pre-church church. And let's say the church started at Pentecost. church started at Pentecost. Let's just say that. Say the church started at Pentecost. Good morning, Maticus Von Atticus. How are you? I'm late, but better late than never. Not always. That's a false belief. Sometimes when you're late, it's over. Not a good policy to go by. Because serious people write you off. You're not considered somebody worth considering. The show goes on. It's, well, if he shows up, whatever. By serious people, goal, but life is much better if serious people take you serious. Anyway, the pre-church church. What was the pre-church church? The church before the church. Let's say the church starting at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came into the people in the upper room. They were able to speak the language of other people, not babbling, but people that spoke non-Aramaic could understand them. People that came from everywhere could understand them. At that point, what was the church? It was a bunch of Jews. So they were Jews. They weren't interested in Christians. They were Jews, and they would continue to go to temple. But they mainly talked about Jesus, how Jesus was the Messiah foretold in the Bible. We'll call it the Bible. So think about that for a second. The first church was Jews saying, the Messiah has come. Here's what they said in the Old Testament. Here's Isaiah. Here's what they said, and he did come. And here's what he told us. Then, at a certain point, more Gentiles were coming in. And the question was, do they need to become fully Jewish? And the answer was no, we don't. We do not need to become fully Jewish. At this point, though, you have the power structure, the organization. And one of the things about all organizations, all things that are self-aware, want to survive and thrive. Well, maybe they don't even have to be self-aware. All organizations want to survive and thrive. So if you have a church, you're building this movement, and you're doing pretty good at recruiting, you got it pretty down, and then a large percentage of the stuff that you always did, the traditions, the Jewish tradition stuff, becomes less important as the Jesus part becomes more important, especially when you start adding in letters from Paul, Peter, James, especially when you have disciples of the apostles, like say Polycarp from, I think, John, Polycarp discipled by John. You have the disciples dying off, but you have the direct descendants of who they had, who they taught, learning about Jesus and what Jesus's message was. So as you're getting more Christianity, less Judaism, which would be a natural thing, right? Because you can't spend all day, can't do, well, we're going to do the Jewish traditional service, and now we're going to do the Christian thing. It's not practical. So you're building this organization. It has to be practical and it has to be pure. So, but it has to be both. It can't be, like I said, can't be all day and expect to have a large movement. It has to be practical, has to appeal to the everyday man, has to be digestible, has to be ingestible. You can't say you need to eat an elephant every time you come to church, especially if people are having a tough time. So the Jewishness part got pared down. The question is, what was the pre-church church? And what if we went back to the pre-church church minus the tradition of being Jewish? Okay, in other words, these people saw themselves as Jews who believed the Messiah had come, who believed the Bible was, the prophecies were fulfilled. That's what the earliest people believed. Jews who believed the Messiah had come, and they were spreading the word to other Jews. The Messiah has come. So they're still going to temple, they're still doing all of their stuff. As Jews, the Messiah has come. And then you have other people who are not Jewish, interested in the Messiah has come, but we don't care about the prophecies from the Old Testament. We care about what did the Messiah say? What did he tell us to do? That was the interest of the early ones. And there was a discussion of, do we need these Gentiles to be fully Jewish? Do they need to get circumcised? And the answer was no. They're grafted in. They're just in. Okay, somebody taking a step back might say, well, you know what? What Jesus said stands on its own, and we can bring in parts of the Old Testament for context when needed. Just like the time when they say, the Pharisees asked Jesus, do we need to pay taxes? And Jesus says, give me a coin. They give him a Roman coin. He said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Okay. If you don't know what that means, there's no context, right? So the Old Testament is important, would be important for context. So things that Jesus said that don't have any meaning unless you know from the Old Testament, from the Bible. Otherwise, if you're starting something, it should be focused on the Messiah, not your tradition. So the pre-church church was Jews who believed the Messiah had come. And then as it evolved, it became more, what did the Messiah say? And for non-Jews, for Gentiles, it was, what did this guy who was God incarnate? Because the Messiah then became God incarnate. What did he say? There's good reason to believe the disciples, the apostles, did not believe Jesus was God incarnate, especially in Mark, where they are more like the disciples. Because if the Creator incarnate, if you believe the Creator incarnate when he said, they're going to kill me and I'm going to come back in 3 days, why wouldn't you be at his crucifixion? Why would you be hiding in the upper room? Why wouldn't you believe when he said, you don't have to worry? Why would people act the way they did if they thought it was actually the Creator incarnate? Okay, it was the Messiah that came. The next David to some, the next Moses to some, whatever. Time. Pre-church church was Jewish. The question I asked the head of the Messianic church here yesterday, Renee, great, smart person, wonderful person, was, why are you doing this Messianic thing? Why don't you just do the pre-church church? Why don't you do the earliest church, the church in 34 AD, 1 year after Jesus, or in that first year, the first 10 years? Why don't you do that? we're going to have Jewish traditions, why don't we go back to we're Jews, but Jesus was the Messiah? And I was asked to do a little bit of research to what was it. And Renee was clear, we're not Jews. Messianic Church is not Jews. It's Christians that have incorporated Jewish tradition to make it more full. Okay, why not have the earliest church? Okay, anyway, with that, we're going to say and cut and cut.